is BYOT. Bring your own tacos.
Dick swinging.
You're listening to American Slacker Podcast.
We can say fuck.
With Matthew Gertz and Jesse Landers.
I don't care, I've been smoking, this is cool. That's a decent amount of sausage. This man needs a doctor! Yeah, I just hope they're tasty. What's up with these clowns, man? Cut the lights and went through people's pockets. Don't you point that at each other. Let them smoke a little. You need to step it up to that point. We're not gonna lead with them. We're not gonna lead with them.
Welcome to American Slacker Podcast. As always, I'm Matt.
And I am Jesse, and today we are joined by one of our returning guests, David Melendez. He was on episode 48 talking about some of the films that he's been working on, and he's back. Thank you for joining us, David.
Hey, guys. Thanks a lot for having me back on.
Yeah, of course, man.
Anytime, man. Now, why don't you tell the audience a little bit about yourself, anyone who hasn't heard on the last episode?
Sure. I'm a independent filmmaker here in Florida, on the East Coast, and I've been making independent films for about 10 years now.
It's fantastic, and some of those films include Misty Blue Lane, which we talked about last time, and then today you're actually back. You hit us up about a new film that you've been working on.
Yeah, I wanted to hit you guys back up because I had a great time last time talking about Misty Blue Lane, which is we're still actually in post-production for that. But we got some good news a few weeks ago about it being picked up for distribution. And during that whole time, I wanted to get back, just kind of keep my feet wet. So we started working on a series of film shorts to make an anthology for another feature that's actually based on true crime. And we finished the first one, which is titled Cleveland. And that's why I reached out to you guys. I was like, let me see if these guys want to talk about this new film short that we made.
And that's cool. I didn't even realize that this was part of an anthology, too. I love anthologies. ABCs of Death is probably one of my favorite ones.
Yeah, it definitely works really good with horror. I had the main reason why I wanted to do an anthology is more for practicality and for cost. Because we can wrap a short in 2 weekends, and we're done. Obviously without post-production, but we can take our time with it, and then when we're wrapped with that, we can move on to the next one, as opposed to a feature film, which is, it's a tighter schedule, a longer schedule as well.
Oh, yeah.
So it's just a different process with this, and also too, what's nice about this is that once we're done with the short, we could actually, shop it around and take it around to film festivals and celebrate it, as opposed to waiting for a feature to finish like we have been with Misty Blue Lane. I mean, it's, like I said, it's still in post-production and still with going back and forth with the distributor on what changes to make and whatnot. But with the film short, it's like it's done, and we're just kind of psyching it out there right now to film festivals.
Yeah, and it's also going to entice people to be looking out for the rest of this anthology that you're creating.
Yeah, that was the idea.
Is there a common theme with the whole anthology, or is it going to be all over true crime?
It's basically on crime stories that I particularly have interest in. I mean, for the longest time, as far as what I can remember, I am infatuated with watching a lot of documentaries on true crime, and I think they do well, especially in publication. I mean, there's a whole true crime section in the library and at the bookstores or on Amazon. I think
even podcasts, that's like one of the biggest genres of
that
podcasts.
Too. Yeah, I think a lot of people are just infatuated with, I mean, it's unfortunate events, obviously, so it's nothing to celebrate about. But I think that a lot of people like myself are interested in the whys, why do people do it, and kind of just trying to do research on these crazy events that happen in our society. And it's based on American true crime, by the way, so I wanted to keep it here in the U.S. as well.
Yeah, I noticed, is American Tragedy the dub name? Is that going to be the finalized name for the anthology, or is that just a working title?
No, that's going to be that's the title we're going with, American Tragedy.
Yeah,
That's a
that's
great
perfect.
title.
Yeah. What made you start with Cleveland? What was the idea that like you were like, this is the one I want to start with out of all of your ideas for this anthology?
Well, I have a very good friend of mine who I've done writing with. His name is Robert Manrique, and he wrote this screenplay with me. It was actually his idea when he brought it up. We actually were going back and forth with, some big crimes that have happened in the U.S. And it didn't matter during what time. And so we had a list of, 10 to 20 cases. And I was trying to go for more something that's not as popular, I guess. You know what I mean? For an example, the whole case with Ted Bundy, let's just say, everybody knows who Ted Bundy was.
Tell the jury they're wrong.
Yeah. They're actually there's a movie coming out with Zac Efron who's going to be Ted Bundy, coming out I think sometime next year.
I think that's a good choice for Bundy.
I'm interested to see it.
Yeah, the only reason I'm bringing it up is because people like Ted Bundy, Charles Manson, all those big crimes, it's been done so much. So we were trying to find stuff that a lot of people don't know about, or they would have to actually look up. So that's what we decided to go with Cleveland about a school. It's technically America's first school shooting, arguably America's first school shooting. So I thought it was interesting. And when he had brought it up to me, he asked me if I knew about it. I'm like, yeah, I remember about it. It was, I was a little kid. I was like 1 year old when it happened, but it was just interesting that him and I
70s,
knew about
right?
this story.
79.
Yeah, it took place in 79. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's the first youth shooter, which is really, coming in today's day, it's a common theme, and it's very odd to see that pattern develop, and how this one went. The infamous saying that she gave when it was over, she did it because she hated Mondays. It was just such a bizarre thing, and
Who
I
doesn't,
believe this
right?
is even before serial killer methodology too. So it must have been just such a mind fuck for these cops that were in the room with the lady, like the real case.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
I had never heard about this before the mention of the film.
Yeah, I
definitely
can't remember
new to
hearing
me.
about it.
Yeah, that was like I said, that was one of the reasons why it I don't know, it just attached to me, attached to us, and then we ended up writing like 8 or 9 drafts of a screenplay, and we did a lot of research on it. And there isn't a whole lot out there like there is, like I mentioned, with other cases. So that was difficult as well. So it was just a lot of reading on, believe it or not, it was in in her parole hearings. There was a lot more information in that parole hearing reports that we're able to gather to put this story together. And one thing, like you had mentioned earlier, like with the patterns that's going on today with these shootings, back in 79, there was no protocol of how to handle something like this. So it was definitely a mind fuck, like you have mentioned. And the fact that she was 16 and she was a female. So it was just something that was just so unheard of that they really didn't know, how to handle it. Like now, these days, somebody mentions the word gun around a school, it's just the whole place is on lockdown. So it was just, it was quite interesting how how this whole thing progressed.
And it's definitely different than the modern day events where you see, people going into the school. It like the Cleveland incident seems like it, without giving too much away, it seems different in a sense than all the modern stuff that you're seeing. It seems like a pretext almost to some of the events of today.
Yeah. First of all, like the school that she had shot at, she did not attend the school. It was an elementary school, and she was 16. She just decided one day to pick up a rifle and fire the gun across the street at the school because she didn't like Mondays. And during the time when we did the research back in 79 when all that happened, there was It was a famous like punk. I guess it's a punk band. There was a band out of Europe that made a song called "I Don't Like Mondays," and it got on the top 40. It was like #1 over in Europe, and it made the top 100 here in the U.S. It was very controversial at the time.
Rats, right?
The Boomtown Rats, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. I listened to it earlier. It's a very different song, but it's perfect for the time period too. And it's weird to know, like, I guess eerie listening to it, knowing that it's based, on shooting like that.
Yeah.
So is the song was based off the event versus she wasn't inspired by it?
No. She inspired the song.
She inspired the song.
Exactly. Huh. Yeah. The lead band member, same thing. Like after reading news articles about it, I guess that became the fascination, is like the why, and the only real reason was because she hated Mondays, so he just wrote a song about it. And it inspired him to write that song.
And then you get Office Space like 20 years later. It's like, someone's got a case of the Mondays.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's definitely a gripping story. It's totally different than a lot of the stuff that you see in terms of the active shooter, spree shooter type stuff of today. I mean, but it also in a way rings back. It reminded me of the incident in Texas in the 50s with the spree shooter who went up in the tower, because that was also another sort of unprecedented first. How do we deal with this kind of thing?
Yeah, it took a long time for response to handle that too. So it's just, again.
And he had military training and stuff too. But it sort of it had, when I was watching your film, it sort of, her character gave me a glimpse towards like that kind of person in a way that, they're disturbed in some way. They might not realize it, and everyone else around them doesn't even know how to process it. And just how that impacts society in a way. It's a very tangled web.
Yeah. It's a complex story too when you look into like the history of the actual girl. I mean, she grew up in a pretty shitty environment. I mean, I guess like they had like one bed in the house and shared that bed, and there was like fucking alcohol bottles like empty all over the house, and victim of a critical injury too, which is another thing that's just like over recent history been proven that people with fucking traumatic injuries to the brain,
was it head injury?
Yeah, can really fucking end up with like serious issues, or become a fucking famous comedian, like fucking Roseanne Barr or fucking Sam Kinison. Both got fucking whacked in the dome and completely changed personality-wise.
I didn't know that. Wow.
Yeah, there is a lot, especially like I said earlier about her parole hearings. There was a lot that came out. Some of it, a lot of people have taken it with a grain of salt because it's taken so long, or is it an excuse that she's making? She still never really admitted responsibility for the incident.
Which is scary.
She's been through, I think, like four parole hearings now. And I mean, when we wrote the screenplay, I was very adamant about not portraying any of that stuff in the movie. So there's if you notice in the movie, there's like one empty alcohol bottle on the floor. I mean, there's also, in one of her parole hearings, she had said that she was abused by her father, sexually abused by her father. She was bullied at school, all this stuff. And then there were kids that said that she was actually the bully. So you don't know who to believe. So we just wanted to make sure that none of that was portrayed in the movie, that you just watched this thing and it was an incident that happened. And then I wanted to make sure that the audience leaves what their interpretation is. I just didn't want to make the movie one-sided into like, oh, it was because she was bullied. Oh, it was because her father abused her. And we don't know if that's true or not. I mean, that's his word against hers. Was it because alcohol? There was also something interesting that she said, that she says she was high on drugs when she did it. And they actually tested her that day for drugs, and there was nothing in her system. But then she created this whole thing saying that there was a conspiracy against her when she was a kid, that they just did that because that they lied about it because they wanted to put her away. So I wanted to get all that cloudiness out and just write this screenplay and make this movie just on what happened, and not really give an opinion. Especially these days, man. I mean, these days, the country's so divided. There's so much arguments going on gun control. You know, in this particular case, back in '79, I mean, what's the difference? You know, back then, you know, one of the big things the media tagged this girl with was that she was a heavy metal listener. I mean, she was really into Alice Cooper. So
Yeah.
you know,
Common theme back then.
Back
though.
then,
School's out.
exactly. So they always have something, like every decade is always something new. Like, what is she doing? And today it's video games or it's movies. So back then it was, you know, rock and roll. So what is it? You know what I mean? So it's just a factor of that. Let's just keep all that mess out of it. And let's just portray this movie for what it is, and or portray this story for what it is, and just have people watch it. Hey, it happened. You can look it up, and then you could make your own decision instead of myself portraying my opinion into why I think that it happened. So I was very particular with that, and we went back and forth. I mean, there was versions of the script. There were different drafts where, in her dialogue when she was being interrogated, she talks about being abused by her father, but we took all that out, and we just wanted to make it, you know, just as clean as possible, just to make it like, hey, like I said at the end, what do you think? And it just gets people talking, and what is the difference between this and the stuff that's happening today? And all the stuff that's happening today, like, is it because we have access to media so quickly that we just get that information so fast, and we're so quick to be judgmental or so quick to like get that information, that back then, you know, what is really the difference here, you know?
Yeah, and I think leaving that part open too, as far as like if you want to look at it as just like a viewer, like leaving that storyline open, you know, to interpretation like that is very important, because there's nothing I dislike more than like a storyline that's painted out way too clear. You know, I want that like interaction of where I'm like thinking like, ooh, what happened there? You know, what happens after or before? Like, you know, like I just...
Because, yeah, I'm sure, Matt, that we even just between the two of us watching it, we probably took away different things from
hell
seeing it
yeah,
in the way that it was
I'm
written.
sure, yeah. Until like I looked into the character, I had a completely different opinion, you know, and then I had a different opinion, and then talking to you, I have a different opinion. It's like it's ever evolving, so it's like, you know, putting it in stone is hard, you know, let alone putting it in a film.
And that's a testament to how well you guys had written this movie, because it definitely it played off of different themes without going straight at it, like blunt to the point.
Yeah, provocative,
like,
sure,
there was
but not too provocative.
There was the one point where she said that, you know, a reporter called her or whatever it was, and that was sort of like I saw that as a little aside and touch to the media and saying like, oh, the fame that some of these shooters get and stuff like that, but it wasn't the main driving point.
Yeah, exactly.
So
it's
really cool.
Thanks, man. And especially like you bring up the media, like, you know, again, I didn't want to sway any opinion coming from me, which I think that was the most difficult part in doing. I would never criticize another filmmaker in swaying their opinion. I mean, it happens all the time, even movies that I enjoy. I mean, we've seen big famous movies. Like I'll give you an example. Like there was a famous movie with Sean Penn and Susan Sarandon called Dead Man Walking, for example.
I watched that in social studies.
There you go. Like that entire movie, it's like, it was interesting because you get to, they actually did a good job in portraying both sides of the story. You have a nun who has empathy for this murderer, but then the entire time you're watching it, like, did he really do it? I mean, he kept saying that he didn't and whatever. And then it wasn't till, I mean, hey, it's an old movie, so I'm gonna give you a spoiler. So sorry for everybody who hasn't seen it, but you know, they actually show a scene of him actually committing the crime. But again, it kind of sways an opinion in like, okay, well, you know, should we kill people who kill? So it became a whole death penalty kind of political type of argument there. I thought it was done very well. I didn't have any problems with it, but I was trying to stay away from that and just kind of leaving it open-ended for everybody to kind of talk about it. There was another movie called The Death of David Gale, I think, with with Kevin Spacey. That one was very one-sided about somebody going to I think it was the electric chair or getting the needle for the death penalty for murder. And, you know, the entire movie was just like, hey, we're putting somebody away who didn't do it, but did he? And it becomes kind of this very political type of statement. For 2 hours. You're sitting there, and if you agree with it, you're probably going to enjoy it more. But then if you don't, it's like, again, I didn't want to do something like that. And again, I'm not criticizing it. It was just, I just wanted to kind of do something different. As opposed to like, hey, this is my opinion. Listen to me. Just kind of wanted to leave it like as an event, like you're a fly in the wall. This is what happened. Check it out. And how does it relate to all the crazy shit that's happening today? And it seems to be happening more, and how the media can easily, make people make their own, they're making people not make their own decision because they're giving them their opinion on the media now. So it's just, and even back then, like I said, since this story is, takes place in 79, even back then the media was giving their opinions. It's like, hey, like, some of the headlines was, this gothic metal enjoyer girl, does a school shooting. It's just like, again, they're giving their opinion on like, this is why she did it. And like all the kids who are into that stuff, what are they going to become school shooters? You know what I mean? Do sexually abused kids become school shooters?
It's like the whole satanic panic of the 80s and all that.
Exactly. Yeah. So we wanted to keep, like, again, I keep saying that that was very important to me. I wanted to keep it very neutral as possible.
And two things about that. I think that with nonfiction, you almost have to take that stance that you're taking with this film, where or if you do, you're gonna get a better product overall because you're dealing with facts. You're dealing with this happened,
right.
And all of that, like you said, could be interpreted in some way. But if you leave it up to the audience, it's gonna work out so much better. And I also wanted to mention, I got like from the main girl, I got very Natural Born Killer kind of vibes in like the way that she talked and the dialogue and stuff.
Even the dress,
which was, yeah, very true. It was very sort of Tarantino-esque in an odd way, like. I don't think I'm putting the right words to it, but I got a very Natural Born Killers vibe, which is going to be a very big compliment because it's one of my favorite movies, actually.
Oh, good. Well, maybe that's because it just didn't seem like she had any empathy or any sympathy. Maybe that's
the bra.
Maybe that's
deal.
why.
Yeah, and sort of that reality TV sort of feeling to real life in a way, where it's like this is a person playing a character, but it's not, because it's like. It's that person is a character in themselves and like all the idiosyncrasies of that person.
Okay. Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah. And in the way that like the cop is playing such a straight sort of like, we need to get the facts. And she's like kind of cracking jokes. Yeah. Oh, can you believe this happened while it was going on? Like, oh, how'd you do it? I did it with a gun.
Yeah.
It's like, that's not what we're asking. Like,
yeah.
It like those sort of little interactions. I was like, damn, like
it's a performance to
this
her.
girl's crazy.
Yeah, like it's a performance to her
Yeah.
in her own head. Yeah. But again, that's your perspective,
Yeah, exactly. I mean, really, the cops, again, they had no protocol for this. So it was just a shock it was easy, but they were prepared to like, we got to be careful here. I mean, technically they're talking to her with no parent or no cop or no attorney. I mean, no cop, no parent or no attorney. So technically like all that stuff is inadmissible, but it's just a matter of he wanted to know why she did it. And he wanted to make sure that, hey, I'm walking on eggshells here. And she just kind of she did spill the beans, you know what I mean? And said everything. Even though it is based on a true story, I mean, we still had to dramatize it for a movie. So, there's right. There's a lot of stuff in there. I mean, that's not, that we had to dramatize, in order to make it more, quote unquote, entertaining. You know what I mean? So, not everything you see is exactly how it happened either. So a lot of it was based on dialogue, based on some books that we read, and like I said, most of it came from a lot of dialogue that was in these parole hearings that were in the 90s. That I thought was really interesting. And it just seemed like every parole hearing, there was new stuff coming up. So that's why I said earlier, you have to kind of take it with a grain of salt. Like, why did it take you 10 years to now it's this excuse this time? So we just had to take all that information. I mean, we're talking like hundreds and hundreds of pages of documents and kind of make this, slim down interview of how she did this thing,
Yeah, she's definitely a very interesting character. Both the real life Brenda Spencer and the character you've created in Cleveland. It's just, man, a story that we both had no idea about, and now I'm just so intrigued by, because it really is the first school shooting that you can hold accountable to record, really, with multiple casualties like this and many injuries. And children, man.
And children, too. That's
children,
always the big, heartstring puller.
Yeah, and they were elementary school kids. I mean, it's just, why does a 16-year-old, what triggers their mind to think of that, And even in one of her parole hearings, like I said, she apologized for that. She apologized that if for some reason what she had done had created this epidemic or this new tactic or this new idea of terrorizing now, innocent children, she apologized for that, but she never apologized for she never took that responsibility for actually doing it, which I found interesting. So that's why it's arguably like America's first school shooting. It was definitely it got a lot of press at the time, but now everybody thinks is a first school shooting is Columbine. I mean, Columbine really did change, how things are handled and just that whole fear of people feeling that they're not safe in school anymore either,
Well, and with Columbine, it was also pivotal in the sense that the media covered it live. It was like the OJ chase, you know. They didn't have the helicopters flying, getting the surveillance during the 70s in this case in the Cleveland.
Yeah.
So that definitely changes the public's perception of it as well.
Yeah, exactly. And like I said, that's why we wanted to do this story, because it was, it's 20 years before it happened in Columbine. And I would say probably 9 out of 10 people have never even heard of this. And they would immediately go look it up. And again, strike up the conversation is, what is the difference now between now and then? And then, there's always this argument with well, it didn't happen as much then. And it's well, are you sure about that? Is it because we just don't have the access like we do now? I mean, there's a school shooting that happens and immediately you could turn on right on your phone. You get a notification and you can go live of a broadcast that's going on. And so we hear it more. Yeah, exactly. So what's the difference? Is it because we're hearing more about it now, or is it really a change in our in our society? Perception. And it's just I just find it interesting in general. And then, like I said, the goal was to get people to think about it and to talk about it. Definitely not to argue about it, but it's almost like to take a step back and try to figure this stuff out.
Yeah. There's definitely a lot of factors to it, man, and I think it's a little bit of everything, honestly. Mm-hmm. You can't help but wonder. People do want to get the glory of being the killer sometimes if they are ill or whatever, and still, is it happening more? Because now after this, I looked into a lot of school shootings over the years, and it seems like it's happened a lot. Mainly, back early on, it was single casualty, 2 casualty, nothing crazy. It was personal problem,
type things.
And it looks like it's fun, but then again, records were shit, man. Who knows? Yeah. What's lost in time. It wasn't nationwide.
Or what was chalked up under a different name in terms of the circumstances.
Yeah.
It could have been something similar, but because of whatever it was classified differently.
Yeah, now, and as soon as it happens, it's picked up media, boom, boom, passes through the nation like nothing.
Well, you wake up now with with notifications on your phone. That's the start of your
Yeah.
day. Is like who's been
No
shot.
newspaper, yeah.
Essentially.
No town
Yeah.
gossip, you know, none of that crazy
Which
shit.
gets
Yeah,
into your
it just-
psyche for sure.
It pops up right on your phone. I mean, and another thing that I found interesting for us was that, like, we had, we were working on this, writing and pre-production last year in 2017 around this time, actually, like around the late summer, September, and we were going to get ready to go into production, and the Vegas shooting happened.
Yeah.
And again, I was so my biggest fear with this was that I didn't want to sensationalize the crime, and I didn't want to make these killers cool looking, or like, hey, they're going to make a movie
anti-hero
about
kind of
me.
thing.
So I was very cautious about that. So it's like, let's take a break. And then of course, when we all got together and we're talking about it, it's like, well, it's kind of inevitable, because unfortunately it's going to keep happening. So if you stop now, when are you going to do it? And then, so let's just take a little break. And then the following February, I mean, we actually shot this in April of this year, March and April.
Oh, wow.
And in February, right? In February of this year, there was the big school shooting in Parkland, Florida, which is,
Yep.
here it was only about 4 hours away from where I live. And so again, it was just like, oh my goodness, and another thing too, like, I didn't want to be caught up in like, oh, okay, well, now you're making a movie about school shootings and about shooters. Like, well, we've been working on this for a while. We actually took the break, but it is almost kind of inevitable. So it was very sad. In February we had that big shooting, and it's just like, oh my goodness, it's like, should I do something like this? And then at the same time, I was glad that I decided to do, like, I for sure, even before these recent shootings happens, I wanted to make sure that there was no recreation of any shootings. That's why that was never even written or even thought about, to actually go out and recreate a shooting. Because I just personally felt like, I don't know, I have no inspiration in that. Like, there's no need for it. I mean, you got the internet for that.
It's just
I don't know.
gore
I just think it's a little
porn,
tasteless
essentially.
sometimes. Yeah.
There's movies like
I mean,
Rampage
if you wanna
for
go
that.
I was gonna say, if you want to go see D-Day, like,
No,
it's totally.
I thought that was very tasteful of you to eliminate any of that brutality, especially when you're dealing with kids. I mean, how the hell do you pull that off without coming off as like a glorified horror film? Like,
Yeah.
Right.
it's you definitely painted a picture that's open to interpretation, and
it shows that you did a good job with that, because I didn't even think about that part.
yeah.
Like, until you said something just now, I didn't think like, I was like, oh yeah, he didn't show like actual, shooting, or like they're like, you see what's happening, but you don't see that graphic violence, essentially.
Yeah, it's a character piece.
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
literally analyzation of a character.
That's exactly what it is, and that's what I found interesting. Like, this kid who shot up the school in Parkland, they had recently released his interrogation video. It was 10 hours. The majority of it is just him sitting there by himself, and it was a good about 45 minutes, I would say, of an officer interrogating him. I watched the whole thing. I thought it was interesting. You know what I mean? Here you have a kid. I don't want to express any opinion. I mean, I think the kid should go to hell for what he did. But it was still interesting to me watching this person who shot 17 kids. It's so relentless, and it's so heartless, and it's so crazy that I'm watching him expose emotion and being scared and all that. And don't get me wrong, did not feel sorry for him at all, but I just found the whole event of that interrogation interesting, and how the police officer comes in trying to be non-biased and trying to get information from him, so they can put a case together, and with no attorney in the room. And then the kid's brother comes in and has an emotional conversation with him. So which basically it's like the whole world is against you, right? Because they know what you did. And it was just still interesting seeing that interaction of what happened. So that's kind of what I kind of went for. I mean, we did Cleveland before that came out, but in Cleveland we wanted to kind of expose that, you know, you watch this character, how do they sit, how do they talk, how do they compose themselves, stuff like that. How do you handle it? You know what I mean? Do you go in there like if you're the cop in charge of the investigation, do you go in there and, you know, pull a Vic Mackey from The Shield and grab a telephone book and start slamming people's faces?
I was literally, when you were talking about holding it together, I was thinking of Vic Mackey, because there's that one episode where he has to go talk to the child molester.
Yeah.
And like all he wants to do is beat the fucking living shit out of that dude.
Yeah.
And he has to keep calm. And then as soon as he leaves the interrogation room and gets the confession, he destroys a door. He just literally destroys it with his hands. And I was thinking, like, that's the same fucking thing. Oh my God.
Yeah, and that show too is, again, like there's a lot of inspiration, you know, like from all these crimes that happen, like especially like a show like The Shield. Like, man, there was like what, 75% of that show was a ton of interrogations, and it's just interesting to me. There's a show on Netflix called Mindhunter, which I thought was fantastic. And it's based on real.
I believe you suggested that.
Yeah,
and it's based on real killers.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's basically on how the FBI created this. At the time, they thought it was this waste of money and this wackiness of like, why do you want to understand or try to create these profiles on these people that are doing these heinous crimes? And it's like, well, we have to try to figure it out. And they thought that these guys were just nuts. And now it's become a whole thing, right? I mean, Ted Bundy's become like the poster child for a serial killer, and just getting that understanding of how are you going to catch a predator, you know, creating these tactics and showing agencies of how to catch these people in the act. Because, you know, unfortunately, you know, you running around with a badge and a gun, you know, doing a whole, you know, Dick Tracy thing is just not, it doesn't work. So I just find all that fascinating
too. You got to wait for someone to get murdered before police show up and start investigating.
Unfortunately, right? I mean, that's it's crazy. You know what I mean? And then once you start discovering a pattern, and then do you tell the public? Is the public going to freak out, or what's the deal? So I haven't, you know, going back to the school shootings, or just all these shootings in general, especially school shootings because they're done by kids, is I have not seen or heard of anybody or anything trying to understand why does it happen? Like, what is that profile? Everything is all, again, we're just so inundated with opinions and so inundated with the media. It's like, why hasn't there been anything project, even if it's maybe they're out there, I just haven't seen it, but you know, why has anybody ever sat down?
Editorializing and assumptions.
Yeah. Okay.
And misinformation being put out there, which is a lot harder to correct once it's out there, unfortunately. Like the whole Columbine idea of them being nerds that were picked on. Bullshit.
Right.
They were the ones picking on people.
Yeah.
Like
they had their own clique.
And now there's this whole idea of like, oh, don't pick on a kid because they'll come in with a gun. It's like, no, it's the kid that's fucking bullying people that's gonna come in with the gun. Like, and that misinformation's out there now because every news station during Columbine was like, oh yeah, they were picked on and they were nerds and they were outcasts. It's like they were outcasts because no one fucking liked them because they were assholes. Like,
right. I know, and then you get so clouded with all this information, right? We're just so inundated with it. We don't know what to believe, or the stuff that you do believe, then all of a sudden people are kind of swaying in that direction, and then really nothing gets solved from it. And then the only thing you always hear is like, oh, it's got to do with gun control, or it's got to do with there's too much violence in movies, there's too much violence in music, or whatever the case, or video games or whatever. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. I just don't think it's that simple.
But it's rarely ever acted on too.
Exactly. Yeah. I just don't think it's that simple of an explanation, and I just wish that there was this whole, I don't know, maybe there should be some type of program where they try to figure it out. I mean, look, I'm human too. I mean, the second I hear something like this happening, it's like, you know what, fry them or throw them in jail for the rest of their life. You know, don't, you know what I mean? Just don't make them feel comfortable, all that stuff. But then there's the other side of me as to like, why do I watch all these shows? Why do I watch these documentaries? Why do I watch, you know, you can go on YouTube and watch an interview with Richard Ramirez, who was the Night Stalker in California. in the 80s.
I was gonna say, even on Netflix, you could watch Interview with a Serial Killer, Arthur Shawcross. That's a serial killer.
Yeah, you watch
really
that. It's
interesting.
just like, why? Yeah, like it's interesting, right? And some people are just like, why are you even wasting your time? And it's just, well, maybe we can learn something from it so that in the future we could identify it and help prevent it. Because right now it's just it's out of control.
When humanity is looking for a monster, all they have to do is look into the darkness and find the mirror.
Yeah,
That's literally what it is.
Yeah.
It's like people are the monsters, and it's not because they're other. That's the easy thing to do, is be like, oh, they were crazy. Like, that's not me. Like, easy enough. Said and done. Fucking wipe my hands.
I think
of
it just
this,
comes
but
from the old
it's so
instinct.
much more complicated.
That's how we used to be, like the witch hunt deal, like. I think we need to study these people, honestly, and I think you're onto that. Like, it's just, I think these people need to be studied. We need to, start a profile for this deeper than it is at this point, because, I mean, something's obviously happening through general population across the world.
And I mean, in the case with your film Cleveland that it's based off of, this was an interesting case because she was so young, and it was a female, which was very rare. In these types of things.
Yeah.
But something that seems clear about that, at least if I were, I know in your film you didn't pick too much from the actual incident, but in terms of like trying to come up with a reason why, but I almost think that it has to do with something in childhood because of how young she is. That's all you got, really. If you're 16, the only time you could have gotten fucked up was like when you were a kid. And that seems to be consistent across a lot of at least serial killers. That's like there's that trifecta of like child abuse and like emotional neglect and all that kind of stuff that leads to you not being a fully formed human being who has empathy.
And again, this is coming from very little research, but it did say that, while she was in custody during tests, she had, they proved she had, damage to her, left temporal lobe of her brain.
Okay.
So, which is a common theme. Injuries make people reckless, and different, So there's a lot of factors. And
I mean, even CTE, we're starting to see that now with football players and stuff.
That's why I'm just curious, if we can mass study these people and start to really write out everything okay, it's proven this one has an injury at this age, or this one was molested as a child, violently, and we can put these patterns together where it's we know what to look for, in some way of developing help for these people, there's gotta be.
That's the main thing.
Yeah, to stop it before it happens and helping, because I mean, we should be about rehabilitation and the whole, not to get too political, but it's it's not about that really with anything to do with jailing these days.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you got thousands and thousands and thousands of kids that go to a school, and then you have not nearly the amount of people that can evaluate them. You know what I mean? And it's just a lot of kids are going through a system, and it's just you're supposed to just pass your grades or pass your classes, get your grades, and graduate. And then there's not. I mean, there's stuff out there. I just don't think it's enough. Where we can sit back and identify this thing. Well, again, as far as what it is, I don't know. I just don't think it's as simple as it's somebody getting bullied, or it's video games, or even if the bully, because there's been bullies around since the beginning, since we've been on this planet. I mean, people bullied each other all the time.
Genghis Khan, one of the biggest bullies.
I mean,
I'm willing to say humans were on the earth talking for a day before the first burn happened. All right.
So what is it? You know what I mean? And I think that if there's rational, intelligent conversations about it and ideas of how it can help, I think that's part of why I didn't want to make this thing one-sided. Look, this is the event, this is what happened, it happened during this time, what is the difference between back then and now, and let's go ahead and talk about it and think about it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely. It's a fantastic choice in terms of how to approach this very complicated subject.
Yeah. And real quick before, I know we're getting ready to wrap this up, but I just wanted to ask, is there any hint you can give us to the next piece in this saga?
Yeah, I was wondering that myself too.
Yeah, well, right now we're on the fence. I don't want to give away yet on who the
Okay.
what the case is about, but one does take place.
Okay.
Well, they actually both take place in the early 80s.
Okay.
And they got to do with one is a serial killer, and then the other one was to get attention to win somebody's love. We're the screenplays are done. Again, we're still in the planning phases as far as like. Again, I'm so adamant about not making this stuff be cool, if that makes sense. You know what I mean? Like to try to make these people look cool.
Yeah.
One of the stories was written by a good friend of mine. I didn't write it, but he did. And when he presented it to me, I thought it was great because what he has suggested was, and this is what we're going to go with, is make one that's from the perspective of the victim and not watching them get killed and all that, but just the perspective of them, of life before they went through that horrific event. And I thought that was different because it's not about the actual killer. So that's one of them. I know it's a little vague, guys, but I'm trying to keep it on the wraps. And
No, it's cool.
because I'm not sure which one I'm going to make yet. Yeah, and then some of the other ones, there's like, there's actually quite a bit of Black Widow female killers. One of them is about that we're working on, and then one is about a soldier with PTSD, which is ironic because it was actually a shooting that actually happened out in California with somebody with that, but it has nothing to do with that. But that's kind of.
Was that on the military base? The one you're thinking of?
No, not at all.
Okay.
No.
And is there a sequential thing going on here? Because he said the 80s. Are you trying to move up in time?
No,
Or is that
not
just
at all. I just
coincidental?
kind of pick
Okay.
stuff. Yeah, I just kind of pick stuff that I think
over.
one that's
Okay.
that's practical to shoot and that's not going to cost a lot of money. And again, something that would be interesting where people would look it up and say, "Hey, I didn't know about this."
Nice. Awesome, man. Always with the provocative. I like it.
Definitely. So your film will be premiering on December 8th at T-Buff, the Tampa Bay Underground Film Festival.
Yeah,
Can people just go there and buy tickets to actually watch it on the screen?
Yeah, it's in Tampa, Florida. So it's gonna have its world premiere there, which means it's never been played anywhere online or any other theater. So it's the film festival's 5th event. They're great people out there. They really embrace local indie film, and yeah, anybody can go and buy a ticket. Usually when they're shorts, they play like Cleveland's playing in a block with 8 other films. You can buy a ticket just for that block, or you can buy a ticket to watch movies for the whole day, or you can buy a ticket to watch movies for the 4-day event, because it runs Thursday through Sunday, I think the 6th through the 9th. And like I said, ours premieres on the 8th, and we just been telling everybody and anybody to come out and watch these movies, and especially watch ours. So
Awesome.
That's
awesome.
awesome.
Of you.
And I hope people do. We'll do the push, get all the Florida slackers out there. Actually, we do have a Florida slacker now.
Very faithful slacker in Florida now. So he could, and this
Awesome.
is up his alley.
Tell him
So
what's up.
God knows, he might already be planning to go to it. Who knows?
Yeah, right. And after it premieres in the festival, if people all around the country want to see it, we were talking a little bit before. Hopefully, it's going to go into distribution, and it'll be accessible to everyone else.
yeah, it's already been pitched to a distributor, which they haven't picked it up, but they're interested in it. I mean, they obviously want me to finish all the shorts because features actually sell better than shorts. So yes, so hopefully by either sometime in 2019 or in 2020. I mean, it's a pretty aggressive schedule. It'll be available. Or actually, right now, just Cleveland alone is actually it has been submitted to quite a bit of different film festivals across the country. So we're just waiting to hear back for notifications, and we get our first notification, I guess our second notification, sometime in mid-December, and then from December through I think next April, we have a list of when we're supposed to get notified if they get accepted to these various film festivals. I know here in Tampa alone, there's the Gasparilla Film Festival is very popular. The Sunscreen Film Festival is very popular. Sarasota Film Festival is very popular. So it's been submitted there, and we're supposed to get a notification mid-December or sometime in January, I think, to see if it gets accepted or not. So knock on wood that it does. So for right now, the way to see it's going to be through film festivals. Then eventually when it gets picked up, however the distributor wants to get it out there, whether it's via streaming or through download, we just have to wait and see. I just wanted to get it out there now and just start, getting some psych for it. So.
Oh yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
Yep, definitely.
And with when you're approved for those film festivals, where could people? Is there a list on your website or anything?
Yeah, well, I usually start plugging stuff on our Facebook page, which is Facebook.com/Studio House Pictures. That is where we go. I put it on my personal Facebook page, and we haven't really done anything with the website for festivals, which is something that we've talked about, but you can go to studiohousepictures.com and you can actually see all the movies that we've been working on and read synopsises and stuff. But I don't know if we're going to create like a film festival link in there or not. We should, but it's just more legwork and stuff like that. I mean, just dealing with marketing alone is a full-time it's a full-time job trying to get it out there. And we also have a very good, actually our best following is on Instagram. I think that's actually how you guys found us, was through Instagram. Yep. We have 4,500
I saw
followers
your
on
production
there.
stills and all the red cameras you're using and stuff, and I was like, ooh,
yeah,
what are these guys up to?
Yep.
Yeah. So we posted on our Instagram, like, where it's going to play. But as far as like right now probably through like January and February, it's going to be more of a Florida thing. And it has nothing to do with us. It's just a lot of the other festivals that we submitted outside of Florida, they don't start picking up legs till like next April or next July or next summer, stuff like that. So
because it gives you sort of like a tour schedule.
What's that?
That's cool though, because it gives you sort of like a tour schedule, like start in Florida, go over to Colorado or something.
Yeah, well, that's if it gets picked up. I mean, they might not either. I mean, it just, the film festivals reject movies all the time. It's either, it doesn't necessarily mean your movies suck. I mean, sometimes it does. I mean, they just don't like it, or they don't like the content, or maybe the production value wasn't good, wasn't to their standard. But a lot of times too, film festivals, they reject movies because of scheduling. They only have like 3 days, and then they have all these movies. They want your movie, but it just doesn't fit in the schedule, and then you get rejected. So who knows? Right. We'll just have to wait and see.
TRT's got to be perfect.
Yeah, exactly. So we just have to wait and see. So
yeah.
Well, it sounds like if our audience wants to check you out, Facebook, Instagram, those are probably the best places. Studio House Pictures, search that on either of those, and you'll find what David Melendez is up to.
Yep. Yeah, or you can find me, David Melendez, on IMDb, or Studio House Pictures on IMDb, and there's links on there, so, I'm searchable, or we're searchable on the internet.
Oh, yeah.
Nice.
Search him up, people. Search him up. And also, search us up. You can find us on Facebook. And you can also find the American Slackers group. All you got to do is search American Slacker. You'll find both there. Also, search it on Instagram. You'll find our art and promos for each and every show, plus a lot of other things. And the main hub, AmericanSlackerPodcast.com.
You can find us also on Twitter and Reddit at AMERSLKR Podcast. All of our stuff is going up on YouTube, along with some bonus stuff. We're editing video clips from Xbox and whatnot on there. Please also rate and review us on iTunes, 5 stars or nothing. That's what we like to say. And also tell a friend, make more of those slackers out there, especially in Florida.
Oh, yeah. And if you want to send us an email.
Push that way.
Oh, yeah? And if you want to send us an email, AmericanSlackerPodcast@gmail.com. Also, search it on Spotify. You'll find the show and the playlist with each and every artist we've had on the show and featured their music.
You can also sponsor our show by, contributing to our Patreon account. It's a little thank you to us, and we'll give you some thank yous back in a way of rewards, and we appreciate any support we get on there.
Hell yeah.
It's patreon.com/American Slacker Podcast.
All right. Dave, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure as always, and we're looking forward to seeing the rest of American Tragedy.
Thanks a lot, guys. I really do appreciate you having me on.
No problem,
Anytime.
man. We'll do it again soon. And thank you, everybody, for tuning in. We love each and every one of you. And until next time, that's it.
There you go.